The sun stood still in the middle of the sky and delayed going down for about a full day. Let me tell you why this was the most important battle in Israel's history. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to tell you about one of the most incredible miracles in the entire Bible. It is the day when God literally stopped the sun in the sky so Joshua and the Israelites could win a battle. This wasn't just any battle. This was the moment that determined whether God's people would survive or be wiped out completely. To understand this story, we need to go back a bit. The Israelites had just crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, they were finally home. But there was a problem. Other nations were already living in this land, and they weren't going to give it up without a fight. Joshua was the leader of Israel. He had taken over after Moses died, and Joshua was a warrior. He was brave, strategic, and completely devoted to God. But he was also facing an impossible situation. The Israelites were surrounded by powerful enemies who had fortified cities, trained armies, and advanced weapons. One of the first cities they conquered was Jericho. You probably know that story. The walls came tumbling down. Then they moved on to a city called Ai. After some initial setbacks, they conquered that too. Word was spreading throughout the land. The Israelites were on the move, and they were winning. This terrified the other kings in the region. But one group of people decided to try something different. The Gibeonites lived in a nearby city, and they knew they couldn't defeat Israel in battle, so they came up with a trick. They dressed in worn-out clothes, carried moldy bread, and pretended to be travelers from a distant country. They asked Joshua to make a peace treaty with them. Joshua and the Israelite leaders made a huge mistake. They didn't consult God. They just looked at the evidence, believed the Gibeonites' story, and made a treaty promising to protect them. 3 days later, they discovered the truth. The Gibeonites lived right there in Canaan. They had been deceived, but a treaty was a treaty. The Israelites had made a promise before God, and they had to keep it, even though it was based on deception. So the Gibeonites became servants to Israel, but they were under Israel's protection. Now here's where things get really interesting. When the other Canaanite kings heard that Gibeon had made peace with Israel, they were furious. They saw it as betrayal. So 5 powerful kings formed an alliance. The kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. They gathered their armies and marched against Gibeon to destroy it. The Gibeonites were in panic. They sent an urgent message to Joshua. Don't abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. All the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. Joshua had to make a decision. He could have said, "You deceived us, deal with your own problems." But he had made a covenant. His word mattered. God's honor was at stake. So Joshua decided to march to Gibeon's defense. But this wasn't going to be easy. Gibeon was about 20 miles from where the Israelite camp was located, and it was uphill all the way. Joshua gathered his entire army and marched all night. Can you imagine? An all-night force march uphill with full battle gear. By the time they reached Gibeon, they should have been exhausted. But God spoke to Joshua before the march and said, "Do not be afraid of them. I've given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." That promise changed everything. Joshua knew God was with them. The Israelites' army arrived at Gibeon at dawn, taking the Amorite alliance completely by surprise. The 5 kings and their armies were expecting an easy victory over Gibeon. Instead, they suddenly found themselves fighting the entire Israelite army, and they were caught completely off guard. The Bible says the Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. The Israelites struck them with a great slaughter. The enemy armies started to panic and retreat. They fled down the road from Beth Horon to Azekah. This was a steep descent, and the enemy was in full retreat. And then something extraordinary happened. As the enemies were fleeing, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky. The Bible says more of them died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. God himself was fighting for Israel with supernatural weather. But there was still a problem. The battle was huge, spanning miles of territory. The enemy was scattered and fleeing, but there were still thousands of enemy soldiers who could escape, regroup, and fight another day. Joshua could see that darkness was approaching. Once night fell, the enemy would escape under cover of darkness. That's when Joshua did something audacious. He prayed. But this wasn't a quiet, private prayer. This was a public declaration in front of all the troops. Joshua said, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." Think about the boldness of that prayer. Joshua wasn't asking God to help them fight better. He wasn't asking for more strength or courage. He was asking God to stop the rotation of the earth, to freeze the sun in the sky, to give them more time to complete the victory. And God said yes. The Bible records it plainly. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Let that sink in for a moment. The sun stood still. Time essentially stopped. Day was extended so that Joshua and his army could complete the battle. The Creator of the universe altered the normal course of nature in response to one man's prayer. With the extended daylight, the Israelites were able to completely defeat their enemies. They chased down the fleeing soldiers. They captured the 5 kings who had hidden in a cave. By the time darkness finally came, the victory was total and complete. The 5 most powerful kings in the region were defeated. Their armies were destroyed. This battle changed everything. It broke the power of the southern coalition of Canaanite kings. It opened up the entire southern part of the Promised Land for Israelite conquest. One battle, one day, changed the entire trajectory of Israel's future. But here's what I find most amazing about this story. It wasn't just the miracle of the sun standing still. It was the fact that God responded to Joshua's bold prayer. Joshua didn't pray timidly. He didn't say, "If it's your will, maybe you could give us a little more light." He boldly commanded the sun to stand still, and God honored that faith. This tells us something profound about prayer and faith. God is looking for people who will pray bold prayers, people who will ask for things that only God can do, people who will step out in faith and ask God to show up in supernatural ways. Joshua could have played it safe. He could have let the enemy escape and fought them another day. But he knew this was the moment. This was the opportunity. So he prayed a prayer that required God to do something impossible. And God did it. Not because Joshua was perfect. Not because Joshua deserved it. But because Joshua was fighting God's battle for God's people to fulfill God's promises. When we align ourselves with God's purposes, we can pray bold prayers and expect God to show up. This story also reminds us that God is still active in His creation. He is not a distant deity who set the universe in motion and walked away. He's intimately involved. He can and does intervene in the natural world when His purposes require it. When God stopped the sun for Joshua, He was making a statement. He was showing that nothing is impossible for Him, that He fights for His people, that when we step out in faith to do what He's called us to do, He will provide what we need, even if it means stopping the sun. So what's your longest day? What's the battle you're facing that seems impossible? What's the situation where you need God to do something supernatural? Maybe it's time to pray a bold prayer, to ask God for something only He can do, to step out in faith and watch Him show up. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.